PBMs are killing people by denying them necessary medication. If anybody out there knows a single person who couldn't afford their medication, had to make a hard choice about whether they could eat what they wanted to eat because they couldn't afford their medication, that is what goes into that CEO's bank account and allows him to make $21 million a year while violating his oath and his contract to the American people. This should be much more than a lawsuit. This should be an indictment.
All right. Hey, how's it going today, Ron?
Sean, good to see you.
So today, I am going to be your goose to Maverick. So I'm going to be the flight engineer or whatever, the Rio in the back of the F-14 Tomcat, or now the F-18 Super Hornet. And I'm going to let you do some of that fighter pilot stuff that you do. And I'm going to try to just let you know if I see any bogeys in the area, and I'll call out a tally-ho every once in a blue moon.
Just do me a favor. Just ask me one question, Sean. And that is, if you were above him, how could you see him? Because we were converted.
We rolled out of a 6. Yeah. No, well, it starts off with I. And he goes, we.
We.
And he goes,
we.
Thank
you. Negative 6G dive. Nobody's ever done that before. I mean, could you imagine? They have this maneuver when you're you probably know it, but it's called the Hick maneuver. When you're pulling G's, you've got to make this weird noise to get your blood flowing. Anybody who's about to pass out on a roller coaster, learn the Hick maneuver. You're going to be just fine. Pilots taught it to me, and it works. I don't actually have to do it on roller coasters.
You squeeze your legs, and there's a lot that you can do to keep that blood from going all the way down and getting that tunnel vision, if you will, and then blacking out.
For all these years, I thought those suits that they wore were just extra pockets for pens. But no, it actually squeezes the blood to try to keep it up towards the brain.
Those are G suits, and we're not talking about the G's from Pornhub.
Warren G suits. That's
Warren G suits. All right.
That needs to be a band right there. Well, let's talk about PBMs, Sean. The most exciting thing in the world, PBMs. Most Americans probably don't know what these things are, but they're actually vital. If you've ever filled a prescription drug, chances are you've had a silent little interaction with somebody who's trying to steal from you. And that somebody is likely a PBM. And here's the funny thing. Congress and the president gave authorization to PBMs, these companies, to get involved in the marketplace as a middle person, in order to try to bring down the cost of healthcare. But as you'll learn during this episode, very quickly, the PBMs got bought out by the very people who own the pharmaceutical industry, and then just became a tool of the pharmaceutical industry to jack up prices. And nobody's been able to do anything about it, but we just got a lawsuit handed down by the Federal Trade Commission against all of the PBMs, which basically alleges and will be able to prove that the pharmacy benefit managers, the PBMs, have been jacking up the cost of healthcare for millions, including needed drugs like insulin, as well as other high-cost drugs. By the time that you get to the end of this episode, you will have the most advanced understanding from two people who are experts in the industry of why your prescription drugs cost so much. And even when they don't cost you very much and you pay a very minor copay, why the PBMs are still baking in a profit for themselves and racking up millions for the pharmaceutical industry. Listen, we've all been getting pissed off by the fact that doctors just want to prescribe these days instead of actually treat us. Well, the reason is because the insurance companies and the drug companies all make money off of pills. They don't make money off of physical therapy. And that's what's trashing the United States. And we'll get to the bottom of it in this episode.
Yeah. And, just to kind of set the stage, the Federal Trade Commission is suing, going after these pharmacy benefit managers, these PBMs. And if you don't have to be an industry expert in the world of healthcare to understand this. I think the average citizen who has insurance coverage and they are told, hey, if you have Optum RX, you should go through our mail order system. You can get a 90-day instead of a 30-day, and it will cost you the same. So the three The three PBMs that are currently being sued by the federal government are Caremark, which is owned by CVS. You have Express Scripts, which is owned by Cigna. And then you have OptumRx, which is owned by United Health Group. So again, me, in just my pragmatic way of thinking, I automatically think there's a conflict of interest here. Because how is it possible that it's okay for the insurance company to own the pharmacy benefit managers when the pharmacy is supposed to be able to take what the script is from the physician and fill what the doctor's orders are? And we're finding a lot of crazy things going on with these PBMs pushing people into biosimilars or putting them into generics. And these chemical compounds that they utilize to create these drugs, they're not the same as the formularies, as the brands. There are some differences between them. But let me stop there because to me, this is a fascinating case. And we've heard a lot really from the Harris Walls campaign about the incredible job that they have done in bringing down the cost of prescription drugs. But the only one that you really hear them ever talking about is what?
Well, insulin, right? That's what we have here. But I think that that's because everybody knows that the food is killing us and causing more type 2 diabetes in the United States. And therefore, most Americans will be impacted by insulin prices than any other drug for the most part. It's one of the most popular drugs. Like, I understand why they target that, right? I mean, if you're going to go after somebody, pick a topic and pick the one that has the broadest applicability to most Americans, because that's a sympathetic case. Most Americans need cheaper insulin. Why? Because diet and exercise not going to be the prescription, right? Let's make sure we keep them on these sorts of drugs, and that's, I think, furthering the system. But I don't.
Well,
I don't
beyond that, though, Ron, I'm sorry, but beyond that, I think one of the biggest problems is that it is easier to pop a pill or stick a little needle in your belly than it is to have to go to the gym, get on a treadmill, get on an elliptical, get on a bicycle, lift weights, do those things that get your heart rate up, get your muscles moving, get that fat turning into muscle. It's a lot easier to take an Ozempic or to take a little shot of insulin or to pop a pill. Because I think in all sincerity, we've become a very lazy society to a great extent.
So this is where you and I may depart slightly, Sean. I started this with it's the food that's killing us, not necessarily it's us that's killing us. I truly believe, and I know we're a bit off topic here, but I truly believe that the way our food is manufactured, the decisions that people are drawn to make, and the subtle invasions that some of these food manufacturers have put into the food to cause us to be this way. I used to think like that. I used to think that people had a choice and they can get on a treadmill and all of that. But now I am seeing it firsthand that our food is toxic and it's causing these sorts of disorders. And I think that most people are rendered relatively defenseless when you look at these strong messaging and signals. In fact, in my book that's coming out next, I run the reader through a visit to McDonald's, and I go through every single hook that they put into you, from the sign that you see on the highway all the way to the time that you end it. And I analyze every step in the way. I counted up every single hook that they use. 37 different heuristics are used against a person. And nobody has the mental fortitude to resist that. Not even the strongest people. Not to mention the combination of salt, sugar, and fat that you get as a result of that is just, it's going to render you powerless.
I don't think that you and I are going to depart, right? Because I wholeheartedly agree with you that the foods we are consuming, the foods that we are giving to our kids, our grandkids, these foods are killing us. I am completely on board with you. I love what Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is out there talking about, make America healthy again. I think it's a wonderful message. I wish we didn't have the border crisis. I wish we didn't have the economy crisis. And listen, I think this contributes to it. And again, we'll come right into the PBMs. But did you see the latest release today, being October 10th, which is the day that we're actually filming this? The economists actually came out today and said the food prices have risen at a much more rapid rate than even what they had projected. And what do you think happens when the costs of healthy foods, okay, fruits, vegetables, those things that don't have sodium and all of these red dye number whatever and all these preservatives and these nitrates and things that are put into the bodies? And again, I have to be very, very conscious of the things I'm eating. Now, sometimes I cheat and I'm stupid because I just like something that's fast and it tastes good. But with my chronic heart condition, I've got to be very cognizant of the foods that I'm putting into my body. So I don't eat TV dinners. I don't eat frozen foods. Do I eat some fast food? Yeah, Taco Bell's my kryptonite. I'm not going to lie, but I agree with you. But I also think that we are the cause of our demise as a society because we are consciously making the decision to eat things that are readily available, more convenient, going to the fast foods because, going to the grocery store is ridiculous. But yesterday, just to give you an idea, I was in Wilmington, North Carolina.
Love Wilmington. Did you get the battleship?
Great. I didn't get a chance to go out there. I literally flew in. I was there for 2 hours and I went straight back to the airport.
I jump behind the guns and I go and I pretend that I'm shooting. It's a lot of fun. Like I'm Cuba, Cuba
Gooding Jr.
Yeah.
So, so real quick. So I get back to the Wilmington airport and there's not a lot of options for food, right? There's this place that you can go and sit down, but I looked at the menu and everything was fried this, fried that, fried this, fried that.
You're in
not really, really not what I was feeling at that time. The other option was Dunkin' Donuts, but I wasn't feeling the bagel, bacon, egg, and cheese, at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So my last choice was Jimmy John's.
I feel like we've plugged Dunkin' Donuts twice now, 2 episodes in a row.
I was like, Dunkin' guy.
Hey, 2 double doubles and a Pall Mall, and that's how I get my day started. You know what I mean? And a dump,
Yeah. So I go to Jimmy John's, and the point that I'm trying to make is for a Jimmy John's sandwich and a Coke Zero, $21. Okay. And all I had was a turkey and roast beef sandwich. All right. But my point being here, and again, I don't want to get sued by Jimmy John's, but that will never happen again.
Free speech, man. You can say
it was horrible. I got to be honest with you. Like, you give me a Jersey Mike's any day of the week, there's no competition.
I know there's a war on speech right now, and I hate to digress, but Kamala Harris just stood up and said that hate speech on social media will not be allowed. That's what her NAACP speech. She said that she's going to crack down on hate speech on social media. And then I've heard Mayorkas give a press conference today where he said disinformation and hate speech and all of that stuff, that's what our agency is here to protect against. Like there was a talking point distributed at some point in the government, like yesterday, that said, call everything disinformation if you don't like it, call it hate speech, and rally for the shutdown. If you want to see our episode on free speech, just scroll down below. You will see everything about Section 230, social media, hate speech. But Sean, I want to call some people out right now. Let's call some people out. So we're going to go to fiercehealthcare.com. Mario set this up for us. One of my questions to our awesome researcher, Mario, was, I want to know what the CEOs are getting paid of these health insurance companies. And here's the thing. I am okay with people making money. I'm okay with people making a lot of money. But when people have contracted with the federal government to reduce the amount of money that average Americans are spending, and average Americans have a hard time paying for healthcare, I really get curious about what they're cutting themselves in terms of compensation. And so let's just look and see how the compensation for these CEOs ranks against compensation for CEOs in other industries. Remember the CEO of Boeing, aircraft are falling out of the sky. Check out the Boeing episode. We light him up quite a bit. And again, not an attack on wealth or CEOs, but if you're not doing it right and you're getting paid a lot, well, that looks like fraud to me. So Andrew Whitty, let's start with him. We can throw his picture up. United Health Group, United, one of the largest insurers, $23.5 million in 2023. His CEO pay ratio, 352 to 1. That's what he's making compared to most other CEOs in the country. I mean, just absolutely astounding amount of money. Let's go to the next one. Gail Boudreaux, Elevance Healthcare, 21 million. Interesting. Karen Lynch, CVS Health, 21 million for Karen Lynch. Congratulations, Karen. David Cordini, Cigna, 21 million. You notice something? Have you ever heard of price collusion? When you decide to make prices all the same so that nobody can find a better deal? Well, it looks like the CEOs of healthcare insurance companies have decided to collude on their executive compensation in order for them all to get the benefit of the fact that they're all paid as fat cats, right? Well, Sarah London is getting paid near 21 million at $18 million. If we put her picture up there, she looks fierce. I would not want to get on the wrong side of Sarah London. She looks like she could tear me up in a courtroom. I don't know if she's a lawyer, but she looks fierce. Bruce Broussard, Humana, $16 million, a little bit lower. He's got a little room to make up there, but his CEO pay ratio is still 192 to 1. Those are the highest paid CEOs basically in our country. I mean, some make more money, but this is an astounding amount of money. So the question that I have is, with the CEOs making so much money, how are the American people doing on the service that they've provided?
Terrible. We're suffering.
So bad that the Department of Justice had to jump in and say, we're going to sue you because you are colluding. You're defrauding the American people. You're charging them up the wazoo for all of these medications. And here's the crazy thing. They're committing kickback violations all over the place. So let's just go through some of this, Sean. And Mario provided us some really good numbers. This first one that I'm going to discuss is literally from the FTC complaint that was filed. So we talked about insulin. In 1999, before the PBMs existed, and certainly before they were in cahoots and bought by the major insurance companies, the average price, is this pronounced Humalog? It's a brand name insulin medication.
Humalog.
Yeah. This was by Eli Lilly. It's a medication manufactured by them. In 1999, the price was $21.
Yep.
Now, inflation exists, and I'd love to quote Milton Friedman on this, that inflation is one of the biggest dangers of any system, and it's because the government prints money, not because of anything else. But inflation doesn't have anything to do with this price jump. This is PBM inflation. So by 2017, the same drug, despite the fact that it would have been likely off of patent at that point in time, the same drug by 2017, $274. That's an increase of 1,200%. That is more than the markup of a shot of vodka in a ritzy bar, Sean. It's insulin. It's like, at this point now, it's a commodity in the United States, and it's something that's widely consumed by a lot of people. What caused that price increase? That price increase was solely caused by collusion in the healthcare industry around specific drugs in order to drive those prices up so that a lot of people can make money. The Federal Trade Commission complaint made very clear that PBMs keep hundreds of millions of dollars in rebates and fees each year and use those rebates to attract clients. So they bake in money for themselves and they use those rebates to attract clients. And then one of the major issues with them is that drug price manipulation that they've engaged in has allowed them to charge customers up to 1,200% increase for these types of medications. But not only that, the 4 top specialty pharmacies in the United States are all owned or co-owned by a PBM. That's what we're going to get to. That is one of the biggest problems in our country. So we have insurance companies and PBMs colluding, and we also have the PBMs and the pharmacies merging the top 4 pharmacies. Eventually, we will really reach a monopoly standpoint where American people are the victims.
As I was listening to you and I was looking at the allegation from the FTC, it's really interesting the way that they break it down to indicate that the PBMs, basically, they created a system where drug manufacturers compete for formulary placement by raising drug list prices. So the system results in higher rebates, to your point, as you were talking about, for the pharmacy benefit managers, but it's done at the expense of patients who have to pay more out of pocket for their medications. I think about one of the medications that I take, and, those of you that are younger than I am, and you don't have heartburn on a regular basis, or GERD as they call it in medicine, I take a medication called Dexilant, okay? And it is, if you will, like a Pepsid on massive steroids, but it's got some other things in it. And I've taken proton pump inhibitors, I've taken, Pepsid and all of these different ones. And this drug came out called Dexilant. And Dexilant is like a miracle drug. I mean, if I miss a day, I know it. But when I take it, man, I could eat the spicy foods I love. I could eat the things that I enjoy, the curries, all that kind of good stuff, right? But here's the thing. It's not on the formulary list with my insurance company. So my insurance company was like, well, we're not going to pay for that. We want you to take Protonix, or we want you to take one of these others that's on formulary. Well, my GI doctor had to write a letter of medical necessity explaining that, hey, Sean has taken these medications. He has an upper endoscopy every year. He's had, stomach polyps, and that's why he can't take these proton pump inhibitors, because they create stomach polyps. They refused even the letter of medical necessity from my board certified GI doctor saying that he's already done conservative meds. It's not working. He needs this. They wouldn't pay for it. So, my cost for that medication was $500 per month for a 30-day supply. $500. And if you don't believe me, go try to get Dexilant, okay? It is $500 a month. So, people will say, oh, there's a coupon that you can get it for, a copay of $25 a month. Yeah, good luck. I've tried it. I even went to GoodRx. I went to all these other ones. Thank God I have a very good friend who is a physician who buys in bulk all of his medications from one of these pharmacy groups. And he got me a year supply for $500. Okay. 500, but that shows you the corruption of the system. That shows you the problem.
Yeah, and one of the issues is that you're not, and I think somebody mentioned this on the Joe Rogan podcast, which was quite interesting, that as soon as somebody realizes you're paying out of pocket, they're not able to discuss price with you, what they pay for the medications. I mean, just zooming out a little bit, I think one of the biggest problems with our system right now is that in capitalism, choice, in all economic systems, choice is really going to be the driving factor. But we lack choice in this area for a few reasons. And this is how these systems end up getting corrupt. And I think that's really the trend of our podcast, is we're looking into these systems and showing where the corruption really is. So let's talk about how choice is removed. Well, first, you don't really have a lot of choice in terms of what insurance company you go for. You could go out on the marketplace and there might be 1, 2, 3, but oftentimes your employer kind of, drives the decision. And so we have to get health insurance. That's mandated by the government. Obama said you will have health insurance. You need it.
That's
we know what's good mandates for you. Yeah. So you don't have choice there. And then when you go to your doctor, well, you don't really have a lot of freedom of choice in what sort of treatment plan that doctor authorizes, because there's standards of care that are created. And so there's certain things they have to do with you. If you have a DVT, they're going to put you on our potential. They're going to put you on a blood thinner. Like, you don't have a choice about that. Maybe that's the right thing. Maybe it's not. I don't know. Not a doctor. Don't play one on TV. But you don't have a lot of choice there. The doctors have the choice. You do have choice in what doctor you choose. Oh, wait, no, you don't have that either, because oftentimes we have to go to a specific group. We're in a specific network, and, there's only one doctor who's got any availability. So we don't have that there. Then when you actually get the medication, you could choose a pharmacy, but no, a lot of people are locked into a specific pharmacy based on the plan. So you can't go to Bob's Pharmacy down the street. You might have to go to a larger one. No choice there. Then when you fill the medication, do you have choice of what type of medication? No. Largely, the formulary of the PBM, the pharmacy benefit manager, is going to pick which medication that you get, because most doctors are writing them, allowing you to switch brands. Sometimes the doctor will write an A brand in your situation, and then you got to deal with it. But then you've got to pay your out-of-pocket costs. And of course, you take your medication and you get your refill. But the choice is also removed from you in terms of what you pay. If you could look up online right now and learn what the cost of different medications are, and where you would be able to get that cost, and maybe your insurance plan would tell you what they're going to charge you for certain things, you would have a little bit more knowledge about that. But unfortunately, you don't get the formulary system. So, Sean, I want to do something very weighty, because we're going to try to explain something incredibly complex and do it in a very simple way. But I promised everybody that by the end of this podcast, you would have a good idea of why your drugs are so expensive. And I know we've talked a lot about this so far, but I want to just break it down very simply. Okay. And let's just use, Bob goes to the doctor, and his doctor prescribes insulin for him. And so then what Bob does is he goes to the pharmacy, and he goes and fills that medication. Now, the pharmacy has medications on their shelves, and they put your insurance information in, as everybody in America knows, and they know what coverage you have. And as soon as they know what coverage you have, this is backwards. As soon as they know what coverage you have, then they know what the cost of the medication is. They don't know what the cost of the medication is, and then apply that to the insurance. And here's why. And this is exactly why the FTC decided to sue. So PBM stands for Pharmacy Benefit Manager. Okay. And as I said earlier, they're put in place by the federal government in order to lower the cost of prescription drugs for all Americans. That was an initiative that was started a long time ago. Unfortunately, they've been bought out by the major pharmacies. And so CVS Caremark, one of the largest PBMs, is actually now, I think that's owned by, is it Cigna, I think?
You said Caremark?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you've got the largest insurance company owning the largest PBM, which was also part of the largest pharmacy, right? I mean, this is just 3 levels of screwed up. But you then submit a claim to your insurance, but your insurance has said, we're going to let the PBM handle this. And what ordinarily they do is they give the PBM a set price. This is what you get for servicing the prescription drug benefits for X million Americans, right? And the PBM gets paid. So they know what they're getting paid from the federal government and from the insurance companies and all that. There's some differences that some experts might point out, but this is just generally how it works. So PBM's getting us all this money because it's like per capita sort of what they're getting paid. Then their job is to save Americans money by making sure that Americans are able to get their drugs, because that would just be cruel if we prevented them from getting their medications, and negotiating prices with the drug manufacturers. So they call up the drug manufacturer and they're like, hey, we've got X million Americans on this type of insulin, so give us a good price, right? But here's what they decided to do instead. Instead of just lowering the price and passing that down to the insurance company, which would lower your insurance rates. Remember, the PBMs and the insurance companies are together, and the PBMs or the pharmacies are together. So what benefits them? Well, it benefits them to charge an American a fair amount of money out of pocket for medication, right? But it also benefits them if they get a good deal from the drug manufacturer. So what they do is they bake in something called a rebate. If you've heard of a drug rebate, this is where it comes into play. So let's say drug X is priced at $1,000 per bottle that a patient's going to get. Well, actually, let's say $10. Well, what they might do is offer some sort of rebate on that drug. I don't want to make it too egregious. A $9 rebate, which means the patient can pay out of pocket, if they don't have any drug coverage for this drug, $10. But then it's possible that the PBM gets a rebate from the drug manufacturer that pays them $9 for this drug. Remember, the mission of the PBMs was to lower the cost of prescription drugs to Americans. But the impact of what the PBMs decided to do when they abandoned their contract with the federal government and decided to screw over millions of Americans is they decided to accept drug rebates called a kickback. Now, Sean, you and I have worked on hundreds of cases where kickbacks were alleged against our clients because it caused overutilization in the healthcare industry. And anybody listening to this who has any knowledge of the healthcare industry would likely be shocked at the fact that the largest companies in the United States where the CEOs are getting paid 21 million, 18 million, 31 million in one case are actually engaged in a conspiracy to pay and receive kickbacks from drug manufacturers. Here's the other thing that they do. And this is alleged in the FTC lawsuit. And I've got a big one coming up here in terms of breaking news that just happened 6 hours ago that I'm about to launch on you related to this, but we got to understand this stuff before I launch that. So we've got the kickback thing. The next thing that they also do is they say, "Hey, drug manufacturer, we like you, Pfizer. We love you. You're always giving us good rebates, right? And because you give us good rebates, we're the PBMs, we control what Americans are allowed to have in terms of drugs. Because you, Pfizer, give us the best rebates. And Reckitt Benckiser or whoever, you don't give us any rebates. We don't like you so much. But we're going to put your drugs on formulary, Pfizer." So that means when I need to fill an insulin prescription, as I'm Bob, the American who fills it, I'm likely going to be filling a Pfizer drug because Pfizer has given me rebates on a lot of their high cost medications. Now, 75% of drug cost is high cost medications. Most drugs are cheap. And so by putting the main drug on the formulary, Allegra, let's say, well, that tells the PBM they want to play ball, which means when Pfizer comes out with a new high cost AIDS medication or whatever, they're going to kick a massive, nasty rebate back to the PBM so the PBM can make money. All right. So an entity that is almost solely paid for by insurance companies and the federal government in order to lower the cost of healthcare for millions of Americans is cutting kickback deals on the side and engaging in collusion in order to put certain drugs on a formulary but exclude others. That's not only a monopoly. A monopoly is when you just quietly own an area because you're good. This is more like oligarchy than anything else. I mean, you have occupied something by deceit and cutting deals, which is not capitalist, Sean. Jump in and then I'll drop the bomb after that.
Well, yeah, I mean, listen, you and I talk about living in a free capitalistic society, right? That's what this country was founded on, was the ability to, create a product, bring it to market, make your profits on that, better enrich people's lives, whatever it is. But when you take something and you turn it into a conspiracy and you create a situation where patients can't get what they need because the kickback schemes that have been put in place to enrich these PBMs, to enrich these CEOs of these insurance companies is so great, that no longer is a capitalistic market. I agree with you. It's an oligarch. It is, to me, this is This is where the Department of Justice should be focusing their attention.
This is something that hurts the American people, not these small bureaucratic crimes that they're running around prosecuting independent pharmacists because they don't want them. I mean, and that's exactly what's happening. And look at the corruption here. And I'm going to call out both sides on this. Everybody since George Bush has allowed PBMs to exist. Every Department of Justice, Alberto Gonzalez has allowed PBMs to exist. Merrick Garland, certainly. Jeff Sessions has allowed. Barr has allowed it. Everybody's allowed PBMs to exist. This didn't happen overnight. This creeped up from 1999 to the present, and it got more egregious during Barack Obama's term, and then obviously Joe Biden's. But there wasn't too much action by Trump against PBMs. It wasn't as much of a priority. But this was always going on, and we always knew it was going on. And only when Joseph R. Biden wants to appeal to the American people and claim that he's lowering prescription drug prices, and Kamala wants to say the same thing, do we actually file a lawsuit against the PBMs? And here's where the bomb dropping comes into play. What was the first response? And this is a rhetorical question, but the first response by the PBMs when faced with this lawsuit? This tells you that where the power is in the United States of America. This tells you who has the power. Their first move was to call for the head of the Federal Trade Commission 6 hours ago by filing a motion saying that they are biased and they should have nothing to do with the case because they've made many statements contrary to PBMs. So you mean to say that because the heads of the FTC have been saying, or the head of the FTC has been saying, PBMs, you're some fraudulent pieces of crap, that you need to be removed from your position? They are powerful. I mean, we said some not nice things about Boeing, and Boeing's done some not nice things to whistleblowers, maybe even some very not nice things, I'll say. But honestly, I am just as concerned about my statements about PBMs, the not nice things I want to say about them, because the PBMs have so much power along with the insurance companies in the United States, and they have a revolving door to the bureaucrats in government. I don't know if this lawsuit is going to be successful. I think that Biden really only cares that he filed it. And that's probably the message that has been sent. But I hope that Donald Trump, if he gets elected, or Kamala Harris, if she gets elected, follows through with this for the benefit of the American people, because these are the issues we should be talking about. Abortion is a distraction. The border, yeah, I'm concerned. But that's not really taking from my pocket right now. PBMs are killing people in the United States of America by denying them necessary medication. If anybody out there knows a single person who couldn't afford their medication, had to make a hard choice about whether they could eat what they wanted to eat because they couldn't afford their medication, or maybe couldn't give their baby what their baby needed because they weren't able to pay for it out of pocket, or went into debt and had to make hard choices. Do I put gas in the car, or do I pay for this drug? That is what goes into that CEO's bank account and allows him to make $21 million a year while violating his oath and his contract to the American people. This should be much more than a lawsuit. This should be an indictment. And yet we still see crazy indictments launched all over the place, wasting government resources, and they're not caring about this. And that's a problem, Sean.
It is. And listen, the pharmaceutical company is the most powerful lobbying group in our country, if not in the world. We work in a $3 trillion plus industry, you and I. And the majority of that money comes from the pharmaceutical corporations. The cost of, listen, I have clients that are rheumatologists and oncologists, and a single infusion for a patient in rheumatology or in chemotherapy could run $50,000 per infusion. I mean, if we want to get serious about saying, hey, we're going to cure cancer, let's start by ensuring that we can give access to patients with the disease so that we could keep them long enough to put them through meaningful clinical trials to get to an actual cure. And call me a conspiracy theorist, but I honestly believe that we already know what the cure to cancer is, but because the loss would be so significant to the pharmaceutical industry, we're not getting it. I wholeheartedly believe that. Listen, I spent 10 years of my career, and I know you know this, but I spent 10 years of my career engaged in bipartisan work with Congress, with members of Congress, people at the head of the Senate Finance Committee, in the House Appropriations Committees. These are individuals that control the purse strings. These are individuals that can make the necessary change, but because they are beholden to their donors, and their donors that donate to these PACs and these super PACs are the pharmacies, these PBMs, these CEOs of the insurance companies. We're not going to see it. And this is one of the things that I think Donald Trump, had he not had to deal with the public health emergency, had he not had to deal with impeachments, had he not had to deal with some of the lunacy that transpired during his first administration, things that we had never seen in the history of this country, I think he would have actually taken on the PBMs. I think he would have taken on the insurance industry, the pharmaceutical companies, because if you remember, that guy who bought the drug where it was 87 cents to treat, what was it, malaria?
Martin Shkreli, I think. Was it that guy? Yeah.
I think that's who it was.
Yeah.
They were going after him. They went after this guy.
Yeah.
And I think Trump was on the right path. And again, remember, hate the guy for his media persona, okay? What he puts out there. But love the guy for his policies, his America First policies, and what he stands for and what he's trying to do. And he's trying to bring the cost of these drugs, not just for insulin, but for all drugs. And I think had he had that opportunity, we would have seen probably these lawsuits under the Trump administration, not for political gain, but because it was the right thing to do to protect American citizens.
I'm with you, Sean, but I think there's some wishful thinking right there. I think that he had the ability to do it. He had a Department of Justice. He could have looked into this issue, and I hope he does it this term. And if he doesn't do it this term, if he doesn't break up, or if he dismisses this suit, I'm really concerned. I mean, one thing that does make me hopeful is that he's probably not funded by the types of interests that are likely going to cause him to want to protect the PBMs. But we know they're very powerful. I am also encouraged by the fact that he put Kennedy up there on the stage. He was a Democrat. He was running as an independent. I got to imagine that he's not bought and paid for by the PBMs. And so if he does put him in charge of trying to fix some of the drug cost issues in the United States, as well as the food issue. And a food episode is definitely something we're going to do soon, because
I love it.
Yeah, we're breaking down some of these big problems in America. These are the things that we really need to be talking about. But no, I will call on Donald Trump to take care of this problem too, as well as Kamala Harris. If she gets elected, she's got to take care of this problem. I have less faith that she will do it, but somebody has got to do it, because it's life or death. And here's one big concern I have, not just about American pocketbooks when it comes to this, but the concern that I have overall, Sean, and this encapsulates my entire position about why our country is failing right now. There's an idea inside of bureaucracy in our federal government that the more complicated you make things, the more difficult it is for the American people to understand it, the more likely that they will face decision overload. I talk about this in my book as well. And decision overload causes inaction. If we can't understand something, and Daniel Kahneman talks about this as well, if we can't understand something, we usually don't act. We let somebody do it for us. We assume that somebody else will protect us. And in many of these cases, we assume that the American government, that our government, the federal government, is going to help us. We assume that the people in power actually care about protecting us, but we would assume wrong, regardless of what side we're looking at, the left or the right. They are not typically in a position where they have more information in order to make a decision. And they're usually just going to be as in the dark as we are trying to make decisions. Laws aren't really even written by congressmen, right? They're written by agenda staffers and lobbyists and all of that stuff. The 1,000-page Affordable Care Act isn't created. It's more than 1,000 pages, I think, but that wasn't drafted or even read by the people who are voting on it. And that's the problem. The more that we get into a system of laws that are confusing, where there are so many subsections and parts of laws that we don't understand, the less the American people are going to understand them, and the more that American people are going to lack action about those laws and not take a position. And our whole goal here with this podcast is hopefully to explain this in enough common sense way that Americans can say, I couldn't read the whole bill about PBMs. I couldn't read the FTC lawsuit. I don't know enough about this stuff. It doesn't make sense to me. But sitting in my car, I was able to listen to Ron and Sean, and they broke it down. And now I know that every time I go to a pharmacy, I'm paying money, not just to the pharmacy, but to the middleman so that they can get a kickback from the drug manufacturer. And that's why my stuff is so expensive. That's what you all need to know. And if we can give you that information at least, you can start making some decisions for yourself when you're voting. How many of you out there took a look to see what Donald Trump's platform says about prescription drug costs in the United States? How many of you looked at Kamala Harris's platform to see before you decide to cast that vote? If I'm dying of cancer, or I have family members who have high prescription drug costs, or I am a middle income American who can anticipate that I will need high cost medications, that's going to be a big issue for me. And yet our airwaves are filled with the abortion debate. Give me a break. That doesn't matter to American people. What matters is their daily lives, right?
I agree with you. And I think, in wrapping this up, one of the things that I get an awesome opportunity to do, because I travel so much like you, I stopped renting cars, and I love driving in Ubers. I do. I love taking Ubers because I have the most incredible, fascinating conversations with people. And a lot of them, I would say it's 50-50, right? Between somebody who is from a foreign land, who immigrated here 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, whatever it is, versus also, half the people are American citizens. Okay. And the conversations are brilliant. And to your point, I think what happens is when you start putting out these 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 page documents from the federal government that has subsection B, Roman numeral 3, subset C, whatever the hell it is, right? People get disinterested, okay? And then when you have this noise, right? You have this noise from the right, you have this noise from the left. People just, like we talked about, block the mechanism, tune out the noise. My wife, Jill, who I think is one of the most intelligent people I know, not because she's got these incredible book smarts or she's got this incredible common sense, because she has both, but because she's one of these people that looks at it and she goes, they're all full of crap. And I think as more and more Americans start to wake up, and I think it's happening because we're starting to see some serious corrections right now. DEI, which was the big thing during the beginning and middle part of the Biden-Harris administration, all of these corporations are reversing course because DEI has failed for all intents and purposes. This woke culture is getting pushback on a daily basis. I give credit to people like Russell Brand, who I think is a little bit out there, but I also give credit to people who I think one of the most brilliant people on the face of the earth is Elon Musk. I got a chance to watch his interview with Tucker Carlson the other day. It was absolutely mind-blowing to me, the things that were discussed.
He did a pretty good job.
He did. But, to summarize what we're talking about, I think you're right. The whole purpose for us in this podcast is to put partisan politics aside. Sure, we tend to lean a little bit more to the right, but that's simply because some of the people on the left are just dumb. And they're more worried about global issues than worrying about what's going on right now, right here in the United States. For example, why the hell are we sending $157 million to Lebanon? Okay. Lebanon, when we don't have enough money from FEMA to be able to take care of the people now that are devastated from Hurricane Milton in Florida, those who were devastated in Florida, Georgia, and North Carolina from Hurricane Helene. We don't have money for them, but we have $157 million friggin' dollars to send to Lebanon. We have how many billions of dollars that we have now sent over to Ukraine? This is insane.
And a Congress that is just about split along party lines is voting unanimously to send it. And I've got problems with both sides as a result. And that's one of the reasons why these aren't partisan issues. And I want to go a little bit further on that, even though this episode is about PBMs, but I think that this is important for people to understand. There's something called the paradox of choice out there. And I hate to plug the book too much, but I go into this as well. And this is one of the reasons why we're able to give so much information to you all, because of the sorts of studies that Sean and I have both done in order to, engage in extensive writing and speaking. But there's something called the paradox of choice. We watched the movie The Matrix, where Neo gets the red pill or the blue pill. He's sitting in the chair. Well, when he's sitting in that chair in front of Morpheus, he's in this like digital self. He's inside the Matrix, and he's not a real person. And the pill is supposed to kind of bring him out of the Matrix. But the choice is, do you want to wake up or do you want to stay asleep, right? Waking up might be a little bit more painful. Staying asleep, you may have a decent life, but it's not your life. You don't have an identity. And that's really what it's like, breaking out of the red and blue mold and deciding to think for yourself on every single issue. Because what both parties want us to do is become diametrically opposed to the other side, and therefore have an in-group bias. This is what this is called, in-group bias to everything red. So you hear everything red and you're like, this is great. Out-group bias, I hate everything blue, right? They want you to do that. But the reality is that all of those things are just Coliseum distractions that prevent Americans from making their own choices. One group that it's kind of surprising that I would plug this group, but one group that does a great job of this is the American Civil Liberties Union, ACLU. Now, ACLU filed a brief in support of Donald Trump. Could you believe it? Do you think those words would ever come out of my mouth? The ACLU filed a brief because they were so concerned about the left's actions, Biden's actions, in filing an indictment against Donald Trump that implicated important free speech issues, that they felt the need to file a brief and say, yo, bro, this ain't it. Stop it. Why? Because the ACLU respects the civil liberties of Americans, and they have a charter and they have a belief system that allows them to stand for what they believe in. And thankfully, they didn't bend because they tend to lean left. Well, that's also a sign that the people encroaching on the civil liberties these days, not necessarily just, Republicans, as most people would think, making, race-based decisions with voting rights and all of that. But there's a lot more. Both sides have an attack right now against the civil liberties of Americans. And this PBM attack is the same kind of attack, right? It's PBMs stealing from you and then paying politicians a whole bunch of money on both sides. You can look at the campaign contributions of these companies, paying politicians on both sides to insulate their behavior so that they can move forward and continue to monopolize Americans and take away your money. The food companies are doing it. We'll talk about that the next episode. The PBMs are doing it. The health insurance companies are doing it. Everywhere you look in the United States, they are robbing you of your own decisions, taking money away from you without allowing you to have choice. And the government is insulating that conduct. And, it's time to take that pill and wake up. It's time to get informed.
I agree with you 100%, man. I am so much looking forward to doing the next episode on food in America. And I also can't wait for us to do the Second Amendment, because I think that is a topic that needs to be discussed, because I think there is so much disinformation out there. And I think it would be really neat to explore some of the recent comments by our vice president of the United States on her gun ownership and where she has fired the gun and whether or not she's actually ever fired a gun. I think it's going to be a very interesting conversation, both of those, and I
Oh,
can't wait.
I don't want her firing a gun, Sean. Here's what we're going to do. Between now and then, we're going to have Mario research what the real definition of military-style assault weapon is.
Yes.
And if he comes back with an actual definition, we're going to send him back to the drawing board because it's not right. I think that's one of the craziest things. Guns have names and they have categories and classifications that have been given to them by the federal government and gun manufacturers, and it's not really that hard to figure them out. But for some reason, we keep hearing about a semi-automatic rifle being a military-style assault rifle. Meanwhile, and I know we're just about to end this episode, but something folks may want to take a look at by the time they hear this. There was an Afghan citizen who was, and I wrote about this on my blog recently, ISIS in America. Afghan citizen was arrested in Oklahoma for attempting to purchase 2 AK-47s and 500 rounds of ammunition. He's being prosecuted currently, thank God. But he got into this country by way of special immigrant visa. A special immigrant visa is a visa that was given. My interpreter was trying to get one from Afghanistan because we were giving them out to people who helped the United States. Biden inked an agreement to basically allow people to come in on these special immigrant visas, even if they weren't assisting the United States and without sufficient background checks. That's how this person got in. And the only reason that they were caught, they've been here for 3 years. The only reason they were caught is because an FBI agent saw a Facebook marketplace post and they sent an undercover in. This person was liquidating all of their assets. And because of the liquidation, they thought something might be awry. They uncovered a plot to kill up to 500 Americans on election day. And Sean, I just thought to myself when I heard about this and I read the complaint that was filed against him, what it would have been like had the FBI not caught this. And thank God they did. But an AK-47 attack with 2 people, he had a conspirator with him on election day at one of the polling locations. And most of the Trump voters probably voting in person because that's what happened in the last election. And a lot of Kamala Harris voters writing in their votes and mailing in their ballot.
Right, absentee ballots.
Yeah, we would have had this terror attack. And then as a result of that terror attack, we would have had a lot of people refraining from going to polling locations because, as you said, on 9/11, when one plane was hijacked, everybody in every other plane was concerned about being hijacked. So once you know it's an act of terrorism, you've got to believe there's coordination. And I don't think anybody's postponing the election or keeping polls open for another day until there can be some security. And the next thing you know, if Donald Trump says this is an unfair election because of that, and that's not something he can say because you get indicted when you contest an election these days in the United States, then we've got a problem. So a Facebook post and an FBI undercover kept us from absolute pandemonium in the United States. Absolute pandemonium, because there would have been a legitimate claim that the election was effectively stolen. That's frightening. I'm sure we'll cover a little bit more of that trial as we get through to future episodes. Feel free to get down there and hit subscribe. Take a look at, we talked about the free speech episode. Look at that, the Boeing episode. I think if you're going to be in a jet soon, you might want to look at that one. But then also stay tuned and click subscribe so you can see that food episode. We're going to go over exactly what the problem is with our food in the United States. We're going to look at Europe too, see what they're doing right.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thanks for hanging out with us today on The Wall. Ron and I hope you enjoyed this episode. Remember, every wall can be broken down with the right knowledge and strategies. So, like you said, if you like what you heard, don't forget to click and survive below. Make sure you connect with us on social media and join the conversation on The Wall. Remember, your feedback and your support help build a stronger community and brings you the content that you care about. So stay tuned for our next episode and keep breaking those walls down. See y'all soon on The Wall.